On this week's Bet the Process, we have a end of year review where we psychoanalyze Rufus and how he wants to move the goalposts. And then we get into some intellectual conversations about the college football playoffs and home field advantage and whether there is some edge in these games coming up. And finally, we end with a little conversation about whether the NFL is exciting or not. So, with that, let's start the process. Welcome to another episode of the About the Process podcast. It's a very special episode. It's our holiday year-end episode. Rufus is in Bali. He's looks like he's sitting on a yoga mat, holding a handheld microphone, ready to do karaoke, if anyone wants the visual. Rufus, how is Bali?
It's very hot, very rainy, but it's nice.
Nice.
I'm here with our good friend Will.
Yeah, that microphone's got to go, Roof. It's
This
not good.
microphone sucks.
Yeah, just take that. Just go with the normal Mac thing. We're just raw. Like last week, I did an intro and effed it up, but just kept the effed up intro because it sounded great. And you probably haven't even heard it, but it's really raw. This is raw also. So now you got done
Is
with
this
that.
better? That's a better mic.
It's better. The other one was like gonna crackle, I feel like, and not in a good way.
Oh,
I don't know if crackling's ever in a good way. Okay, so Rufus.
I bought this mic to travel with. It's smaller than the normal mic that we record with. And
All these portable mics suck. I mean, honestly, the only mic that's good is this mic that we have. Okay, enough mic conversation. People are already probably stopping on this.
move on to
What's
Tony or Will or Chris.
Huh?
No more mics.
What? Got it. Got it. The jokes. The jokes, they just keep on coming. What's going on in the world with you? You did this boating thing, and then you had this like really philosophical tweet about goalposts and moving goalposts, and so what's going on with you? Tell us
That's
a little bit.
that's
The
not even
people
the
want to
philosophical.
know. The people want to know what's going on with you. And also teaser alert, we're gonna have Michael Lewis on this podcast pretty soon because I listened to that podcast that he did, and it's really good.
Oh,
It's entertaining.
fantastic. And I think
The
it's
whole
I
thing
hope
with LJ or whatever is so effing funny. I mean, like it's so funny. Like, so if anyone hasn't heard Michael's new podcast, and it's not just about sports betting, it's about generally the fan. What is it called? Against
against the
the
rules.
rule, against the rules. Yeah, you should listen to it. It's great. We're gonna have Michael on to talk about it, but Rufus is very much featured in there, although he brags about never having a losing day or something like that in
That's
that
not
episode.
true. I've never said that.
Whatever.
And
Anyways, you're a
I
tout.
have had losing months,
Have
apparently.
you seen all of this like tout, anti-tout stuff? And then our friend Kirk Evans is like basically shilling for unabated and ETR because he's talking about how ETR is the only respected tout out there.
I thought his point was that they just don't get as much shit because they do things they're not all over Twitter like Right Angle Sports is, thinking everybody's trying to pick a fight with them. But I don't know.
I mean, I like Kirk, so I'm not gonna talk any shit on him, but like it's just the whole, I mean, the
Oh,
Circles Off does this whole like thing where they talk about gambling Twitter and it's very like meta on meta. It's like, and I wonder if people would want us to do something similar. And my guess is they wouldn't, and neither of us is informed enough, well, in this whole like meta of the meta to actually talk about this. But that's just definitely not our lane. And I'm happy for that not to be our lane because I feel like we're trying to elevate the conversation and get another lane or something like that.
I mean,
Like
I think
no
our
one,
lane right now is Jeff sets me up to answer a question and then goes off on a tangent about something else, so I don't even actually answer the question.
okay, answer the question, Rufus.
Well, there was never,
By
I
the way,
mean,
Mike, can I tell you my
okay, yes,
Amazon, my
yes,
Amazon
please do.
AI, my Amazon AI that helps me shopping is named Rufus.
I know. You're like 6 months late. Everybody messaged me about that 6 months ago.
Oh, it's like everyone's is Rufus. I thought mine was specifically
No,
Rufus, and they might be reading
everybody's.
in my DMs or something like that,
I'm
and
the new Alexa, sadly.
know that I have a marginal friend named Rufus. Okay, so
Okay,
sorry.
so
Answer the question.
So
I don't even
end
remember
of
what the question
so I don't
was
know
at
what
this
the
point.
question was either. You basically said Rufus wants to talk about philosophical
Oh
mumbo
yeah,
jumbo.
talk about philosophical shit. What's the philosophical shit you want to
So
talk
the
about?
I mean, with that kind of setup, I don't know how I can fail. I guess I did tweet something out about wanting more goalposts in my life. And I think I've been during this trip, I had 10 days completely away from internet electronics except taking pictures and with other human beings existing, coexisting with nature, being on nature's time. Some days we didn't get to raft because of the weather. Some days we had to go further. You know, I slept in caves. Um, and I kind of tried to zoom out a little bit and think about where I want to go both like professionally and personally, which Jeff's giving me this look, but I think it's
No,
a
I'm going
never
back
end-
and reading the tweet. So during this trip,
and
this is from at Rufus Peabody. During this trip, I've been trying to zoom out and think about what my next 5 years ideally look like. One realization is I need better goalposts. Making incremental improvements to hold my position isn't as motivating as working towards a bigger goal I may or may not reach.
yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but I think that trying to tread water and stay where you are doesn't have the same motivating factor that kind of having a new goal to reach does. And I met this really interesting guy named Luke Richmond when I was on this boat back to civilization from the Gordon River. And for lack of a better term, I'd call him like a professional adventurer. He's also an author. He backpacked or he walked across the Gobi Desert with a wheelbarrow behind him that he was dragging, taking his stuff. I think with his wife. He has, I believe, rowed across from Africa to South America. He's right now training to row
So
from
he's like a poor man's Allison Levine, basically.
Yeah, I guess. He's
Yeah.
trying he's trained yeah. He's training right now to row from New Zealand to Australia in a two-person boat. He's going to go 2 hours rowing, 2 hours not rowing. They're going to alternate, and it's going to take 2 months. It's through some of the most treacherous ocean in the world, and he won't be able to sleep for more than 90 minutes at a time. But he has written a few books about his
Like, let's be honest, that's pretty fucking cool. We should get him
Yeah, it's
on.
very
I
cool.
was about to
Okay.
like shit on this whole thing, but like that's awesome. What's his name?
Luke Richmond. He's Australian. He's from Tassie. He was
Is that
former,
what people call
he was in the
Tasmania?
military. It is. It is what they call
Oh my God,
Tasmania.
you're such a dork for just saying
He's
that.
he's in the military. He was in the military. Then he was kind of backpacked around and I think had a lot of fun and became, I think, a drug addict. And now he's a married. He's a professional adventurer.
He's a little ripped, huh?
Very. One of
Yeah.
these books is called 5 Years to Live, and he gifted me a few of these. And in the introduction, he talks about this exercise that he and his wife do every few years, where they convince themselves that they have 5 years to live and think about what they want their next 5 years to look like. But I think for that exercise to work, you have to actually really put yourself in that frame of mind where if I only had 5 years to live, what would I do? And he says, I mean, 10 years is too long. You're going to focus much more on career stuff, probably. There's not as much urgency, and 1 year is too short, where you're probably just going to be trying to be happy and tying up loose ends. So
So
I thought it was
it's sorry, go ahead.
no, I was thinking about myself and what I would do. So he does all these adventures, but I think one thing this trip that I did made me realize is that A, I love being in nature, but B, I need more goals. So rafting the Franklin River was uncomfortable at times, wet, cold, but it was a challenge. And I guess that having that having that challenge and having that goal at the end was really fulfilling. And I think doing difficult things that have an endpoint is something that I get a lot out of. And I think with sports betting, there isn't really an endpoint, at least the way I've been doing it the last 5 or so years. I haven't had an endpoint. I haven't had some goal I'm trying to reach. And you're never with modeling, you're never going to have the model be perfect. You're always, there's always improvements to make. There's never done. But I
Yeah,
do
I
feel
mean,
like,
sorry, I thought you were
please go
done.
ahead.
No, it's there's a couple things that this makes me think about. One, um, a lot of times when you talk to like VCs or investors, so there's this guy named Alex Bard who's a really successful venture capital guy, was the youngest SVP ever at Salesforce. He once told me, like, just think about your life in 5-year chapters. What do you want the next 5 years to look like? And so that kind of reminded me of what you were saying. And then the other thing is that, in terms of just this like incremental or these goal, it's interesting because when I worked, my first job out of college was I was a trader on the Chicago Board of the Option Exchange. And I kind of knew that that job would never be for me because I never felt like I was like creating anything and I never thought there would be like an end to what I was doing. And I feel like that's a little bit of how you feel, which is like it's a perfectly fine way to make a living the way you make a living. But I think the difference between how you ultimately make a living and how I do is that I'm constantly building something in everything I've done. Like I'm trying to build a company or build a whatever, build a new division and it's there's nothing wrong or right with either of these methods, but like I think for me, I would never be able to just be in finance and be a trader. And so that's kind of like what it reminded me of. But I mean,
And and Jeff, I think I have a lot of you in me in that regard. Goddamn, people again. That was not a good sentence.
I've never been in you, Rufus.
That was not a good sentence.
This is like the time you told me like nobody ever lets you finish, and I'm like supposed to feel like, yeah. Anyways, your point
My
is,
point
I
is,
don't. I mean,
I
I
do
think we're
like,
very different.
but
I
I
don't
like,
think we're similar at all.
no, but I like going from thing to thing. I like having a challenge, finishing it, going on to a different challenge. I'm not good with the day-to-day minutia. I'm not good with maintaining things being regular. I think in an alternate life, if I was in the corporate world, I think I could have been an okay consultant, probably.
I mean, I think you would have been good at whatever you did. I think we've talked about this. I think that you undervalue your worth or your skills outside of the world of sports betting. I think your desire to solve problems and to, come up with solutions creatively and whatnot. I think it's a superpower. And I think, again, like that line in the that Roxy says in like it's a hard way to make a live or whatever what is it? It's
Hard
a
way to
what's
make
whatever.
It's a hard way to make an easy living.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's a sports betting is tough, man. Like so it's interesting because like have you guys still not bet any college football yet?
We bet some college football playoff stuff, but
What
aside
did
from
you end
that,
up betting?
we bet Clemson side. We bet Clemson over.
So you went 1-1.
And I had some first half money line stuff too. And I think I had a small SMU position that lost.
The SMU game, I would bet 1,000. Like it's crazy to think about that game because like I honestly think I'd bet that game SMU over again if it was played over again because that game and like everyone I was talking on because I am on a horrible, horrible run on Tony Kornheiser. I was, I
Sorry,
think,
I've
two and
left you.
four, 3-4, and then 1-5 in my last 3 weeks. And I had SMU in the SMU over. And I contend SMU was Rufus, you about to say something?
I was
You
just
were fine.
like, can we get back to, we're going off on a tangent, but
Okay, sorry. Let's go
let's
back then.
finish the tangent.
No,
You
no
can
tangent.
the
Forget it.
SMU.
No, forget it. Forget it.
I'd like
So
to,
no, I mean, I don't know if I had I think last week in like 7 games that I bet, I had 5 pick 6s against me.
that's rough. That's very rough.
Yeah. Anyways, go ahead. What were you saying? What do you want to get back to?
We were back talking about the goalposts and 5 years left to live and finishing things. And like, I think if I had 5 years left to live, I probably would still want to be doing some sports betting, because I do think that there is something I get from sort of following results and having a scoreboard each day, and that sort of mix of skill and randomness, you know, that it's not like every day you're going to win, but I don't know, there's something that just speaks to me about that. I think I'd want to, do more outside of work, obviously, but I think I'd also want to really focus more on do so, trying to help the industry as a whole in some way. And I have ideas. I believe that everything comes down to incentives. And right now the incentive structure is really misaligned for operators in ways. And I think that I have some ideas on what we could try to do to make that more aligned. For example, I don't really want to. I'm still sort of sussing this out in my head, but I do think that sports books operators should not be responsible for responsible gambling stuff, because they're never going to be incentivized to. They're always going to be actively disincentivized to do anything about it. I think I know most people probably don't like government regulation and stuff like that, but I think there should be a third party entity that is in charge of that, and sports books can focus on competing on product and all that other stuff. But so I think I'd want to do something something there to try to sort of leave some sort of mark. And also because it's like it's the industry I know the most about, and it's something I do care deeply about. But I hope I have more than 5 years left to live. And so conditional on that, it's kind of, I don't want to say I'm at a crossroads. I feel like I've said that like every year the last 5 years, but it was motivating some of the people that I talked to on this trip, talking to our horse betting friend and seeing kind of, he's still motivated despite all his success to grow. And his partner, who owns this museum in Tasmania that's kind of the biggest tourist attraction there, like getting to meet him and sort of see like he's kind of gone a different direction, but seems to have found some fulfillment there. And so but I think what I'm realizing is I don't want to stay the same, just plodding along. Like I either want to try to go even bigger and expand into a different universe betting wise, or maybe make that less of a focus of my professional life, maybe be more on cruise control, step back from it, and I can still participate in it without it being everything. And then I could focus more of my bandwidth on other things. But again, it's what are those other things? And I think another thing I'm realizing though is that sports betting, it fulfills part of me. Like Jeff, I would say my number one adjective is curiosity. I think that drives the introspection, for example. I'm curious about what drives me. But there are other more sort of feeling traits that don't get really satisfied by sports betting for a living. And so if you really want to hear something that's going to sound all philosophical, I can find the note that I wrote. I was walking in Sydney last week, and here, I'll read this. Jeff, this is going to sound, you're going to laugh at me. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to laugh.
We are all artists. Our art is expressed in everything we do. Two rafting guides will approach the same rapid in different ways, each guide's brushstroke creating a different painting. Just like everyone has unique fingerprints, we all have a different brush we paint our world with. But we're all also the art we make. The process of creating our own art is art itself. The comedian's joke isn't the primary art. her performance of the joke is. One piece of artwork isn't inherently better or worse than another. A song that evokes a strong emotional reaction from one person might have no impact on another. We all view the art differently. And I went and wrote more around this stuff, but that's kind of the crux of it. And I think I'm again, don't laugh at me, but I hate the term data scientist. You know, I think
Well,
I'm
yeah, I
like,
mean it's a nothing term, right? It's a new term. But like everything is a new term, like when you get
it's
down
true.
to it.
But there's such an art to what I'm
Oh,
doing
you just hate
with,
the word science, but I think that just depends on what you think science is,
I
right?
hate the term
Science
in
is
general. I
science is
hate analytics.
creativity.
Yeah, it is.
A scientist
Right.
is creative. Like my son asked me the other day if like he grew up to be an engineer, would I be happy? I'm like, yeah, of course I'd be happy. That's great. You know, like what would be, but like there's so much creativity in the work that you do, and I think people don't realize. I mean,
There's a huge amount of creativity, but it requires being inspired. You need inspiration.
okay, so let's
And
I think it's
like Jeff,
interesting.
this has been the best betting career results wise that I've had, like financially by a wide margin. But I feel like I've accomplished less in terms of building stuff. Like I didn't accomplish the goals I wanted to accomplish that I could directly control. And so the good results have come from a good process in building stuff previous years.
Well, I think what you're going through a little bit is what growth in a career looks like when, especially like as it pertains to going from being an IC, an individual contributor, to more of a manager, to someone that's trying to like scale up what they do. I think it's interesting to think about. I have a good friend who I'm trying to like come hire to work with me, and he's getting offers to go work at a bunch of different places. And some of the big tech companies that he wants to go work for, what he likes about them is they've gone back to a world where you don't have to be a manager to be senior. You can be an individual contributor and be senior because of how important individual contributor work is. So for you, I think you're just trying to figure out the difference between trying to create scale around what you do and being the one that does the work. I would argue that the type of work that you do is more of a commodity than a lot of the other types of IC work. So for you to really reach your potential, you do need people to work underneath you to do some of that grunt work. And you do have to have a certain amount of detachedness from the work that you do, to get to the level of scale that you'd want to get to. I mean, I again, like, I mean, you're like a
If I want to
lost.
get there,
Well,
if
that's what
that's
I'm
the
saying.
direction
Like
I want to go, but
you're like a little bit of a
that's the goalpost.
you're like a little bit of a lost soul in that you've always like not known exactly what makes you happy, right? And like what ultimately drives you. And yeah, I mean, I think we've talked
I
about
think
this. Like you can
happiness is,
have these kick-ass, last year I know during college basketball, you were winning more money than you'd ever won, and yet you felt unfulfilled because it was kind of someone else's work that was driving those results versus yourself.
well, and Jeff, we actually had the best golf year we've had, and
Well, that probably made you happy
we
because golf had
returned
been kind
double
of treading
digit.
water for a little while, right?
We somehow managed to return like 13% for the year on golf matchups. We hit well over our theoretical. And yeah, no, but why? And why did we only return 3% last year and we return much higher this year? Variance. Like I don't think there's any big reason. There weren't any big improvements made.
Yeah.
But it's hard now to sort of say, okay, let's go make some big improvements. I
I
mean,
mean,
I know that
are you gonna do other sports? I know you've been like talking to people
we
that do
we
other
brought on some
things.
people, or we brought on a new person in September on the data science side. So I'm kind of excited
What
to
sport will that
going
person
into different
tackle?
things. We're still discussing that. He's doing some stuff to help right now on some stuff we're already betting, but there's different avenues we could go, and this is one of the things I've been thinking about.
I mean,
But I
what is
think it's hard.
give us Give us a teaser. What are you thinking
I
about
don't want
getting
to. I
into?
don't want to say anything there, just because I want to talk to him before I say anything more, just out of respect for his privacy.
Yeah, but you're not talking about, well, you didn't say who it is.
Correct.
So you can tell us what you might be thinking about doing.
Well, I think a natural next step is betting NBA,
Right.
given the college basketball infrastructure we have.
Got it.
Um, but I mean, I've
That
tried to even
seems like,
I've tried to even think bigger in terms of, like, we have a bankroll that's sitting, not being necessarily efficiently deployed all the time. Could we put, like, what about doing some stuff with financial markets? Is there any opportunity there? Or, I mean, what about, like, I don't actually think, I think I'm at too much of a disadvantage to even try to want to get into horse betting, but I find the intellectual challenge interesting, given the fact that you're not just predicting a race, you're predicting market inefficiencies, you're predicting what people are going to bet on, what that pool of money is going to look like. And there's all sorts
oh,
of,
I never thought about that. So you're predicting the direction
that's
of
a
the
fair mutual
pari-mutuel.
market,
Yeah, you're
right? Yeah.
predicting the direct. Of
So
course, that
I
makes sense.
so I don't know the answer, Jeff. I'm kind of, I've been away from work for the most part, and but I haven't. What's interesting is being detached from day to day, especially right now where there's, I mean, I guess there's NFL games going on. There's no college basketball going on. There's no golf going on right now. I just haven't felt super motivated to work. I've been motivated more to just write stuff down, write, these, ideas, life philosophy stuff, all that.
Yeah.
And you said I'm a lost soul. I do think, though, happiness comes from being in the present. I think it's that simple.
Okay.
And I think I've done a very good job of that the last few years. But you do get to a point where you're like, oh, well, what's it all for?
Okay. Seems like a good segue into, like, are you guys gonna bet any of the college football coming up?
We may. Right now, we're all just enjoying the holidays,
Got
but
it.
we will be betting some college football playoff stuff. I don't know in terms of bowl games. There are numbers that are way off what Massey Peabody would indicate, and that makes so much sense because of the transfer portal and the fact that the
Mhm.
rosters don't look that representative of what they were during the season. For example, like, there's Syracuse, Washington State. You look at that line, and I'm like, holy Jesus, is Washington State just like fielding like a JV team entirely? Do they? But again, if my number's that far off, I'm sure there's a reason for it. And so, having not dug into it myself, I'm not really going after it.
Did you follow the first round of the college football playoffs at all?
I saw there were a bunch of blowouts, basically.
Yeah.
I didn't watch it. I didn't watch any of it.
One of the things I found interesting, I talked about this on Kornheiser this afternoon because I pre-recorded so I don't have to get up tomorrow. There, like home field advantage is real, right? We know that. We don't know how big it is, and we don't know what causes it. And if we want to assign a home field advantage to a game, we have like a number that we assign it. Now, we've had people on the podcast that really get into the nuances of home field and when they might be bigger and when they might be smaller based on like buys and things like that. And this is obviously small sample size and probably a lot of like recency bias. But my hypothesis is that this home field advantage in these games is much higher than a normal home field advantage because there's very little familiarity in the away team going to the home team. They've probably never played there before. In Tennessee's case, it was the coldest game that Tennessee had ever played in their career, in like the entire history of the school. It's the coldest game they'd ever played. And you add that all up with the rest, like the not traveling and like the what's going on and like Notre Dame, they like postponed their finals. So their finals would be kind of like after this game so that people would still be on campus. The amount of so like is there a way that we would think like maybe this home field is like some of the biggest home field? Like if home field is like a range, could this be the highest range that home field could ever be? And how much could you ever see home field being worth in a, edge case distribution? Because do you believe that like home field advantage is probably a distribution? And so what's the tail of that distribution?
Those are great points. And I was thinking about something similar, just with the fact that these fans, we've never had a college football playoff home game before, how crazy the atmosphere must have been. And your point about temperature, that's something that we can generally quantify or estimate, I should say. But the fact that, as you said, Tennessee has never played, they've never played a game in the cold like that. And like that's, you know, you'd expect it to be even bigger. And so I think with any of these things, I don't think you can come up with an exact number, but you could put a confidence interval on it and say, okay, maybe normally this would be 1.7. The fact that I add in my distance traveled stuff, maybe it's up to a 1.9. But now let's look at, actually, it's probably, I think base is higher than that for college football, but then it's the equivalent of it being like it's a non-conference game where, the team hasn't played there before. You add in the weather, and then you could say, okay, well, do we think the additional effect of the crowd being super into it is going to add 10% to it, 15%, 20%? I don't know the answer to these things, but I do think these things are interesting because it's kind of the art of it. It's a small data problem. You're trying to predict something that hasn't happened before. It's the kind of thing that machine learning is not going to be able to do.
Yeah.
Right? Machine learning is built off of what's happened.
Well, but
and finding things that are like, it's a black box isn't going to be adaptable to stuffing like that.
so I think my main question would be like, how big could this effect be, where the edges, because like, on the margin in the NFL, the distribution of home field is probably pretty small.
I
But
would
in
agree
this
with that.
situation, this is like the distribution could be much higher.
But
And I
okay,
think like
so because of
what
what? Or if we're
no, no, like
saying,
what I'm
because
saying is, Rufus, like, what I'm saying is it just highlights the idea that we don't really know where home field advantage comes from, right? There's theories, right? There's motivation, there's reffing, there's familiarity, but like we know that all these things probably contribute, but no one has like a real. I mean, we had Robbie on who says that he's done quite a bit of this looking in the NFL. And again, this is 100% recency bias, 100% small sample size, 100% anecdotal, but it sure seemed like there was a lot of home field advantage in those first four games. Now,
you also
so
had mismatches too.
yes, well, the one that I thought was interesting was Tennessee. Because I remember I was saying on Saturday going into that game, I was like, well, this is the one where we have two Power Five conference, two real teams going against each other and all this kind of stuff. And that was arguably the biggest blowout of all the games where like, they
You had to
got a
spread over a
fluke.
touchdown, though.
What's that?
You had to spread over a touchdown.
I know.
It was so
So
low. We had
I'm
Ohio
and
State
like
money line.
what's interesting if you think about it, you remember when Georgia and Tennessee played and Georgia was like a 10.5 point favorite. Right. So it's like, it's interesting that if you think back on it, and you would argue that like Ohio State is better than Georgia
I would definitely argue that, and I would have argued that
right,
before.
right. So my point is like 7.5 now seems short if you think about that. And then like the ceiling, that's the other takeaway that I have from this is I feel like after watching the first week's games, and again, like 100% recency bias, 100% overreaction, but this is Ohio State's championship to lose because they are, like Bud, we had Bud Elliott on, and Bud basically, you weren't here, but Bud basically says he thinks that this is a bunch of 4 or 5 seeds that are playing. And the reality is that Ohio State's probably the best team. And they have a very tough road because they're going to have to play Oregon and then probably have to play Texas before they play the other side. So you understand why they're not like they are, I think, the favorite right now. Um, but watching that game, man, I haven't seen a college football team look like that all season, and they looked great.
I think, I mean, as someone that didn't watch it, I can't say I can't say much about the home field, in that regard, but I would still caution you to say, okay, what is the impetus for it? Like, if it's the cold weather, that's one thing. How much is the additional sort of fan engagement, crowd noise? Were there a bunch of false starts? Was communication really impossible? Like,
I mean, they just had
everybody,
that look that they were. So Will Howard, I don't know how good Will Howard is, but Will Howard looked amazing in that game. And the freshman they have, Jeremiah Smith, that looked amazing. And their running back looked like he was running at a different speed. And their defense, like, Tennessee had no, but again, like,
I heard that Tennessee's fans traveled very well, and that there was a lot of Tennessee fans in attendance.
supposedly, and then Tennessee's players came out before the game and like, shirtless to warm up. And it was like I mean, like, it was like the dumbest thing, right? They're like, oh yeah, we're going to warm up out here with no shirt on, but they had like no shirt on, but they had like,
Intimidation to show that, well, it's to show they're not
they
scared
had
of the
like
cold.
hoods on and things like that. It was like they're like, you could tell they were cold. Anyways, but Tennessee. So this is the thing. Again, as someone that was holding Tennessee futures, right, and holding Ole Miss futures, if you'd given me a choice, and they were both about 30 some to one, if you give me a choice to have one of them make the playoffs, it would have been Mississippi for sure. Because I just never was that impressed with Tennessee. And I don't like they had basically that one win against Alabama that got them in, and generally they were pretty lackluster. I think Heupel's a great coach, so I was expecting or hoping that it would turn it around. And but I don't know. I kind of think this is Ohio State's one to lose now. Ohio State Oregon's gonna be
It's
awesome.
so interesting that people were calling for Ryan Day's job after the loss against Michigan. And I mean, because I guess when you're at Ohio State, beating Michigan is really important. Just like if you're at Army or Navy, beating the other military academy is important.
Yeah.
But
You
I
follow
still,
any
yeah.
what would you guys do? Can you talk about what you would look at in the college football playoffs? Or I guess since you're
Oh, for
not
sure.
down.
I definitely can.
All
We're
right.
not down fully. I mean, I think I placed a bet on I when it came out. Actually, the price that's still available, Penn State minus 11. I am giving credit for buys to the higher seeds here, but I think Penn State. Let's see, the Massey Peabody number there is minus 14.
Hmm.
I have a
Interesting.
lean towards Arizona State, towards the underdog there. I'm just not as high on Texas, clearly. And that's I make that 10.5. Ohio State, Oregon, I make Ohio State minus 1. And then Notre Dame, Georgia, even before factoring the fact that Beck's not playing, this is one where I think we're going to be betting Notre Dame, and probably tomorrow. So hopefully we don't move that line. Listeners don't move the line, but I make the line Notre Dame minus 3. I think Notre Dame.
That line
I have
came
I have
out.
Notre Dame as the best team in college football right now.
So that line came out. So like Notre Dame futures would be something you might be interested in, given their path is like relatively easy now.
Well, they're playing against Georgia. That's not easy. You'd rather play
Yeah, but I
against
mean, like compared to the other side of the
Arizona State or
bracket,
Boise State, clearly.
right? That's true. Um, Interesting.
Yeah,
Well,
so
there you go. You've been following the NFL at all? NFL is very interesting now.
it is.
I think
I
so.
haven't been following much, but it just feels very boring to me in my head at the moment.
Well, I think it's the most wide open it's ever been, right? And I mean, and maybe that's not true because maybe this is just Kansas City's like we're all just playing in their world, and it sure seems like they're the modern day New England Patriots where they play possum during the regular season, they get their shit together in December and they make sure that they get the bye and they win out and their defense is great and Mahomes does enough to keep them in every game and win every game down the line. But I mean, I think the NFC is pretty fascinating with Philly and with obviously like the Lions being a
Washington
train
does
wreck of
well.
injuries and the Washington one's interesting. I talked about this on Kornheiser. Our friend Judah really had this great insight about Jaden Daniels and his scramble rate. Like he scrambles like around 23% of the time before his injury. When he got injured, he started only scrambling in like the teens, like 15%. And then a couple weeks ago started to scramble again in the 20 some rate. And that's one of the reasons he liked the tails in that Washington game. I was on the over in that game, Washington +4, and the Washington team total over, all because of Judah and throw the damn ball. That's his what he is on Twitter. But you guys should all reach out and get his newsletter because like that's his stuff is gold, the stuff he talks about and whatnot. So, but I think the NFL is very interesting. I think it's going to be. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting playoffs because I think that there are a lot of teams that I mean, Baltimore, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, probably not Pittsburgh, but Buffalo, Baltimore. And what was interesting is I don't believe a lot in anything that Bill Simmons says as it pertains to like analysis, but he was talking about Cincinnati, the Bengals being a team that would scare a lot of teams if they got into the playoffs just because even though their defense sucks, they can just like he's
They
kind of
have Joe
like
Burrow.
he's also kind of like lucking. He's like awkwardly or accidentally getting into what we always talk about, which is how much more important offense is than defense, right?
Mhm.
Where offense is like so you have so much more control over it. And having like a Joe Burrow that can go up and down the field and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, like when T. Higgins there, and this is again another shout out to Judah, but when T. Higgins is there, they're the best offense in football. So it's interesting. Anything else?
I don't know
Anything
why you're
else you want
still
to talk
listening to
about?
Bill Simmons, but because
I
he's
it's
he's a Boston boy. You love your Boston
I
boy.
find most of his content entertaining. So I kind of like hate listen to it. So I'll listen to it. I'll get like kind of angry, but I'll listen to it and it is what the mainstream fan listens to. So you gotta like know what the mainstream people are doing. So we do the opposite because we don't want more than 7 listeners. We're happy with 7 listeners. No,
You don't want
we're
to be
happy
dumb.
with 7. Yeah. This is a great story. So I was at the NBA Cup, and I was at the
What's
finals
the
in
NBA
Vegas.
Cup? What's the NBA
It's
Cup?
the in-season tournament that they play.
Oh,
Our,
this
our
is year
friend
two of
Evan
it, right?
Wash, yeah, yeah. So I
Yeah.
was at the final game in Vegas, and I was sitting behind an NBA executive who I knew, who was with someone that does a bunch of marketing stuff for DraftKings, and I guess he's been there since the beginning. And he's not their CMO because their CMO is a woman named Stephanie or something like that. I didn't know who he was, and he turned around and he's like, oh, you're Jeff Ma. Like we talked for a little bit. He's like, oh, I do a podcast with Rufus Beauty called Bet the Process. And he was like, hey, should we sponsor that? And I was like, yeah. I mean, no, you don't want to because you don't want our audience and like it's not a good brand fit. And he goes, oh, thanks so much for being honest about it. And it was like a
Made him
classic
want it
case of
more.
no, I mean, we would never. How much money would DraftKings have to pay us to sponsor our podcast where like our own dignity or our own like principles
Oh,
we would
just
throw out
just
the window?
pay me in fresh accounts.
Really? How much would it how much like literally if we had to do a full football season of DraftKings promos where we had to legitimately say bet on DraftKings, how much would they have to pay you to do that?
I want to. I'm. I think the best payment would be an account that could get high limits and not be limited, because I think I could make that worth more than they would ever consider paying.
Well, but there's a number there, right? There's a
Yeah,
number you'd
I don't know.
sell
I
out
don't know
for.
what the
What's
number
that
is, Jeff.
number?
You're right. Everybody does have a number they'd sell out for. I don't know what that number is.
But your number, you're quantifying it in a different way. You're coming to it with your
Yeah.
opportunity to earn. So come on, what's your
Well,
number? What's your number? I'm trying to think of what my
I,
number would be.
I don't know. What would your number be, Jeff?
For a full football season of having to do DraftKings promos.
And it depends on what the promos would be. If like
I
how
mean, are
well
we
if
allowed to
it was
talk
predatory
pejoratively
mark,
about? No, we have to like talk in
is
glowing
it
praise of
predatory
DraftKings.
marketing?
No, we'd have to like, yeah, it'd have to be like somewhat predatory, come play here, like that kind of thing. Mine would be, I think like I'm
It
right
would
at a
be
million.
like it
I'm
would be
right at $1
like
million.
play this contest with the guaranteed entry or whatever
Yeah,
that I just
mine's
kidding.
right at $1 million.
Oh, mine probably I don't know. I don't think I'd be that high.
I think mine's $1 million.
I don't think I'd be that high, dude.
All right. Anything else, Roof? Anything else you
Because
want to talk about?
I don't think us being sponsored by DraftKings would really affect.
I'm just a really like
No, it's right.
sadly
It's principles, right?
principled.
Like
It's
it's
like I'm a
principles.
sadly
Like,
principled human when it comes to this kind of
I,
stuff, but I can
you
throw
know,
my
I'm a
principles out the
Jeff.
window
You know,
for
I'm a
it.
principled human too here.
How about we did this? We took the $1 million and then we donated $500,000 of it to like the some sort of like
National Council
GA.
on Problem Gambling.
Yeah, yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. That then I can use that to do good in the world. Oh, by the way, I think I want to have you donate to Sandy Hook Promise, which is what Chris Farr just was suggesting, and then I did a little bit
Okay,
more research on that.
that's
But that was
perfect.
that was
I've been waiting. I was told like that this would happen last week, but that was
I
like
know.
6 weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm not so good at this. I'm good at
Okay,
procrastinating like every
but you are good at winning. Bet the Process Survivor,
I am. I am.
winning asterisk,
Uh, yes.
co-winning.
Co-winning. Co-winning. The guy that co-won with me DM'd me and he seemed like a very nice guy. I want to do that. We haven't really talked since that poker tournament, but I kind of want to do another one of those poker tournaments. That was fun.
That was fun. I feel
Yeah.
like I feel like my chances would have been better with better internet,
Yeah,
but
we'll talk to our friends at
I had
poker.
some sweats. It was fun.
We'll talk to our friends at Poker Now and see if they'll. You know that what we gave away has a lot of value. When I
Hmm.
was in Vegas, I saw our friend Schwan. You know Schwan Liu, the professional poker player, and
Yeah.
she was like, "Oh, you gave away 3 of those? That's amazing!" And I think she said that she would join us in the next one. So we'd have like a fun little game, and we'll give another shout out to Poker Now .club because they were a great sponsor. So okay, anything else, Rufy? We're
Nothing.
trying to get the cheetah
I'm
on.
heading
What's
yeah,
that? Go ahead.
I'm heading to
The
surf
cheetah.
school for a little while.
All right. Go to surf school.
I'm gonna go. Well, I'm going to this like 5-star hotel that does like surf and yoga stuff, and it's gonna be fun. And then I'm going to Korea for a day, and then on the way back to Vegas, and I'll get to
And
Vegas November
next week
31st.
I'm going to be in Hawaii. I was supposed to play in the Century Pro Am, but
Whoa,
I turned it
whoa,
down. I turned it down
whoa!
because
Wait, why?
I'm going to be with my family and I don't want to ditch my family for a day.
Family. Just for to play, but you get to. Okay,
That's a real Pro Am, by the way, too. That I'd actually get to play with like real pros in that one.
right, exactly. These are.
Yeah.
It's the Tournament of Champions, or at
Yes.
least I
Used
think
to be.
so.
It's not anymore because they don't do it that way anymore.
But the question is, if you were paired with like, let's say Scotty Scheffler, would you turn it down?
Yeah, I still would. I mean, it was turning it down because I didn't want to ditch my family for a day. So during one of the few vacations we take together,
What if your family got to be inside the ropes with you?
they could have been. I'm sure that wouldn't have been a problem. But yeah,
What are you going to do instead? You have to make that day worth it.
you know what that day is, right? That day's January 1st. I'm gonna be sweating a bunch of college football games. So,
Truly a
anywho,
fan.
you're making me regret my decision. Okay, Rufus, great to
Jeff?
chat. Good to see you.
Likewise.
Next week, I think you're going to be on your own. You got to do this thing on your own. You got to find a guest and do this thing.
I can
So
do
for
it.
those of you guys that really relish when I'm not on the podcast, that's probably what's going to happen next week. So.
Maybe I'll have Michael Lewis on when you're not even there.
No, that's some bullshit. Don't do that.
Okay. you're like, oh, I can't have a good guest on because
So, no, you can have a good guess, just not Michael Lewis. So, because I have a lot of questions I want to ask him, and some of them
Good.
pertain to like you guys, like your interplay or him using you as a subject, and they're questions that like only I could ask. I don't think you'd have the ability to ask these because
No, that's
you're
true. You're the intellectual heavyweight here.
no, that's not what I'm saying. It's
I
they're
know.
like kind of introspective about you and him interviewing you. Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We'll talk to you guys all again, or I maybe in 2 weeks or Rufus in a week. But
I'll
anyways,
be here
we'll talk
next
to you
week.
all. All right. Bye, Rufy.